over a period of time, and that's what this is.
One more question on that.
Yeah.
Per sources, per people that have talked to the State Department and the Iraqi governments, the renewing sanctions is based on the progress that the Iraqi government is making towards the energy independence from Iran. Since 2018, you are renewing this sanctions waiver to Iraq.
Yeah.
Could you speak of the nature of this time's renewing? Is there any change? Is there any limitation that how much energy Iraq could buy from Iran in this?
So the government of Iraq can speak to how much energy they may or may not need over the course of this 120-day period that was just approved. But to the first part of your question, I just talked about in answering Nick's question, we have, over the past decade, have seen some measurable steps of Iraq weaning off Iranian electricity. Like I said, currently we anticipate that they are relying on Iran for about 25% of their electricity. A number of years ago, that number was 40%. Also, in recent years, we have seen Iraq double its electricity generation capacity at home. So we are seeing steps in the right direction when it comes to weaning itself off of Iranian energy, and we'll continue to keep a close eye on that plan. Rabia, go ahead.
Thank you, Vedant. I just wanted to follow up on my question yesterday. The photo of Israeli soldiers posing in front of the Turkish-Palestinian hospital in Gaza. What is your reaction to this photo and the reports that the IDF is using this hospital as their military base in Gaza?
So we've seen the reports on the Turkish hospital, and we are in touch with Israeli counterparts to learn more. And that's really all that we can say at the moment on that. I think at face value, when looking at that image, what we see service members posing in front of the hospital. So I don't want to draw any conclusions beyond that. But we have asked the IDF for additional information, and we look forward to receiving that. But beyond that, that does not change the position that we have held for quite some time now, that Israelis need to conduct their operations in such a way that civilian infrastructure, like hospitals, like schools, that harm to those kinds of infrastructures are not brought about by their operations. And that continues to be our position.
Will the U.S. make its own assessment in this case on whether or not IDF is violating international law?
At this point,
this is not the first time we are seeing photos of Israeli soldiers.
At this point, we have asked our
civilian infrastructure and using hospitals as their military base. There are many reports about.
We're in touch with our Israeli counterparts, and we're looking to understand more, and that's where we are in the process on this for now. Go ahead. Sure. Go ahead.
So Russia's deputy foreign minister said today that Russia does not rule out the new deployments of nuclear missiles in response to the planned U.S. stationing of long-range conventional weapons in Germany, with Interfax citing him as saying that the defense of Kaliningrad between Poland and Lithuania was a particular focus. Would you be concerned about such a deployment, or do you view this as posturing? And have you thought through possible responses?
So certainly wouldn't speak to responses from here, and obviously colleagues at the Pentagon can speak to that in greater detail. Of course, any kind of rhetoric, language, when talking about the use or deployment of nuclear warheads is of course concerning, and something that we'll continue to pay close attention to. This is something that we have seen the Russians do and say, and thump their chests a little bit on for a number, for quite some time now, dating back to even the early months of their aggression into Ukraine. So I just don't want to speculate, but we are of course continuing to monitor closely.
Okay, and then Germany next year plans to cut in half its military aid to Ukraine, saying it hopes that Ukraine will be able to meet the bulk of its military needs with $50 billion in loans from the proceeds of frozen Russian assets. Do you think those loans will be sufficient?
So obviously when we're talking about the use of those sovereign assets, that's something that the G7 worked very closely on. So we no doubt believe that is something that will be able to bolster the Ukrainians' efforts when it comes to defending their territorial integrity and sovereignty. As it relates to the Germans and their own budgetary decisions, that's an internal process for them to speak to. What I can say is that over the course of this conflict, our German partners have been irreplaceable and amazing to work with when it comes to supporting our Ukrainian partners. And broadly, our allies and partners across Europe have continued to shoulder an immense burden when it comes to supporting the Ukrainian people. And we have no reason to think that kind of support across Europe, including in Germany itself, would not continue.
And Germany's plans come despite concerns that U.S. support for Kyiv could potentially diminish if Trump returns to the White House. Have you had conversations with your German counterparts about these plans to cut aid in this context?
We talked to it's important to remember Germany is one of our most key and important partners in Europe. We talk to them regularly around the clock. I don't have any specifics to share on this news, though.
But does this increase your concerns about the future of military aid for Ukraine?
Like I just said, we have no reason to believe that aid from across Europe will not continue to be robust in supporting our Ukrainian partners. Leaders of these European countries have themselves said that, including Chancellor Scholz, and the United States has also. Since the passage of supplemental, we also have continued to show our support to our Ukrainian partners through PDAs and other kinds of support, and we have no reason to think that won't continue over the coming months as well.
Okay, sorry, just quickly on Evan Gershkovich. His trial moves quickly through the witness testimony behind closed doors today. Was the embassy able to have access to his trial, and when was the last time the U.S. had contact with him?
Sure.
And then what's the latest on a potential prisoner exchange for him and Paul Whelan?
So a couple of things. First, we are obviously watching this trial very closely. Embassy Moscow was not able to be at the courtroom given the short notice that they were provided of its date and some additional logistical hurdles that they faced. In terms of the most recent consular visit, Ambassador Tracy visited Evan on May 23rd. And broadly, let me just say that we have been clear from the get-go that Evan did nothing wrong and should not have been detained. To date, Russia has provided no evidence of a crime and has failed to justify Evan's continued detention. Evan should not be detained. Paul Whelan should not be detained, and both of them should be immediately released. As it relates to where we are in the process, I'm not going to speak to negotiations in public. We are seeking the release of Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan as soon as possible. The timeline of the trial and what route that takes does not have a bearing and has no impact on the urgency that the United States has been prioritizing in this effort. We want both of them home immediately, and will continue to work in this area until they're reunited with their loved ones. Go ahead,
Thanks,
Shannon.
Vedant. Follow up on that, actually.
Yeah.
So Evan Gershkovich is due in court again tomorrow. Will U.S. diplomats be on hand for that hearing or attempt to gain access?
We will certainly attempt to gain access. I don't have any more specific than that, but I'm happy to check with the team in Moscow and see if we can follow up with you.
Thank you. And the timeline of the trial that seems to have rocketed forward, does the State Department have any insight into why this timeline has been moved up? Is it because perhaps Russia is hoping to secure a deal?
I don't have any assessment on why Russia moved the trial up to this month. What I can say is that this timeline, first, I think it's important for us to note from here that this whole legal process is a sham for Evan. He is being wrongfully detained. He did nothing wrong. We have been clear about that from the onset. Again, I will use this opportunity to echo that Russia has provided no evidence of a crime and failed to justify the reason behind Evan's detention. Now, that being said, this fake sham legal process that we are seeing play out has no bearing on the urgency that we have placed on seeking a release of Evan's detention and seeking a release for Paul Whelan as well, and we'll continue to work that process tirelessly.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, go
When
ahead.
was the last time there was any active, substantive discussion between the U.S. and the Russians on this matter?
It should be no surprise to you, I would not speak to those kinds of negotiations or process from up here.
Has there been any other offers put on the table after the ones that you guys
I'm just not going to
to
negotiate in public. Thanks. Janie, go ahead.
Thank you, Vedant. North Korea. Recently, a series of North Korean diplomats overseas are defecting to friendly countries such as South Korea and the United States. The reason is said to be Kim Jong-un's pressure to fund nuclear and missile development. How do you view this situation?
Well, it certainly should come as no surprise that there are people in North Korea who want to leave the crushing oppression of the DPRK regime. Specifically, though, Janie, I don't have anything to offer on the process. I'm sure our colleagues in the ROK MFA may have more to speak to any specific defections, but from our vantage point, should be no surprise that there are members of the North Korean community who want desperately to be somewhere where their basic rights are protected, where they have ease of access to democracy and basic human principles and freedoms.
In a past year and a half, 20 North Korean diplomats have defected to South Korea. How many North Korean defectors have recently come to the United States?
I'm not aware of such a number. I'm not aware, but I'm happy to check with the team for you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Two questions, please. Thank you so much. One, as far as U.S. diplomacy and foreign policy is concerned, this senator story from New Jersey has become a global issue now. My question is that many countries may have affected or may have benefited from his being on a long time on a foreign policy or a committee on international committee on foreign policy issues. How the relations will be with those countries who may have benefited from his being on the committee on.
So, Goyle, I appreciate your question, but I am just going to defer to the Department of Justice, given that continues to be an ongoing law enforcement matter.
And second, sir, as far as U.S.-India relations again, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Moscow, meeting with Russia's President Putin, was criticized here, even by the Ukraine president and many others during the NATO summit in Washington. So how our the relations with the U.S. and India is concerned as far as the visit and NATO here is concerned today, if you have any talks with the Indian authorities or foreign minister or any others as far as his visit to Moscow is concerned?
Well, look, broadly, India continues to be a country in which we partner with in a number of key areas, and that was clearly on display last summer when we hosted Prime Minister Modi for a state visit. But beyond that, in the context of Ukraine and Russia's ongoing aggression and its infringement on Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty, we continue to ask all our partners, including India, to support efforts to realize an enduring and just peace for Ukraine. And we urge Russia to withdraw troops from Ukraine's sovereign territory. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It's a Bangladesh issue. Student demand quota issue is in danger now. They killed more than 50 people today, and on 16th, 7 people killed on 16th. So there's a big chaos going on there. What do you have? The Prime Minister is ordering police to kill students, innocent students. They are demanding for quota. Instead of your merit should be your knowledge, not the quota. So they are demanding a whole Bangladesh is in a chaos now. What do you have? What the United States of America stands for it?
Matt spoke a little bit about this earlier in the week, so I will just echo that we're continuing to monitor the reports of violence from the ongoing protests in and around Dhaka. Freedom of expression and peaceful assembly are essential building blocks to any thriving democracy, and we condemn the recent acts of violence in Bangladesh. Our thoughts are with those who have been killed or injured by this, and we're continuing to rely on media and contacts on the ground for information.
Number two is like military and BD are on the road. So do you have any comment on that?
So again, we need to make sure that any kind of freedom of expression is happening safely and people are free from violence. That's something we're continuing to pay close attention to, but I don't have any additional updates on that.
Thank you.
Jalil, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Vedant. First, a quick thank you from these 24 Pakistani girls who visited State Department just 2 weeks ago. It's a student program, STEM. They especially emailed me as well. These are some unrecognized State Department's workers who play a wonderful role in doing these projects and something the U.S. government does for these poor countries. So thank you on behalf of them. Just two questions. 50,000 Afghans in Pakistan are waiting to be brought to the U.S. $20 million, according to my banking information, is every month is spent on them by the State Department. Your comment on that, whether it's a good use of the taxpayers' amount, and also whether you are aware that these individuals that are there, they're involved in some anti-state activities in Pakistan. Like,
are you talking about specifically those who are SIV?
Those 50,000, not those millions of Afghans. Those specifically 50,000 Afghans that the U.S. has. They are holding them in Pakistan because the U.S. is doing their process to be brought to the U.S.
Right. So for Afghan allies and partners who may be eligible for relocation to the United States through the various sort of pathways that may exist, whether it be SIVs or others, we continue to focus on doing everything we can to process those applicants as swiftly as possible. We, of course, appreciate the partnership of certain host countries, in this case of Pakistan, and we'll continue to do everything we can to process those quickly and efficiently.
No, but what I'm saying is, are you aware that some of them are involved in supporting?
I don't have any comment on that.
Just one more question, sir.
Yeah.
In Pakistan, several journalists have now started using this term emergency, which is basically a sweet word for martial law in the country. Has it passed your ears that these discussions are going on in Pakistan, and your thoughts on that?
It is not.
Thank
The
you.
pink. Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Please give us an update or maybe details about U.S. Envoy Brett McGurk's visit to Middle East.
Brett McGurk works at the White House, so I will let them speak to any of his engagements. What I can say broadly about the efforts to get a ceasefire, as I said when answering both Matt Lee and Saeed's question, is that we are continuing to work this around the clock. We think that it is a vital step that's necessary to do everything we can to get the region out of endless cycles of violence. It will be irreplaceable in surging humanitarian assistance into Gaza, and it will be critical to making sure that all of the hostages are released as well. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks. On the humanitarian truce in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, what specific moves is the U.S. taking to ensure that this truce holds?
So this is something that we are working closely on with the parties. We're going to work closely with the government of the DRC, Rwanda, and Angola to support regional diplomatic efforts to reach a durable cessation of hostilities and set conditions for the voluntary return of displaced populations. We're closely monitoring the truce, and we are going to work closely with the ad hoc verification mechanism. Since you've asked the question, I also want to offer that through USAID and the Department of State and others, we've allocated more than $620 million in humanitarian aid to the DRC in fiscal year 2023, as well as that, and that does not include our support to the UN peacekeeping mission in MONUSCO.
And then what outreach is the U.S. administration making to Rwanda, which has been accused of supporting M23?
I don't have any specific diplomatic engagements to share, Daphne, beyond just saying that this is something that we'll continue to work closely with appropriate governments. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I have two questions on China, if I may. Human rights issues. This Saturday, July 20th, marks the 25th anniversary of the Chinese regime's persecution of Falun Gong. Will the State Department take any action against Beijing to mark this occasion?
So I don't have any actions to preview from up here, but look, broadly, we have seen the PRC take a number of steps over the past many years that we view as a crackdown on human rights. One, it is something that we will continue to raise with PRC officials directly, and two, we won't hesitate to take appropriate actions from the U.S. government, and you've seen us done so.
And on the second question, in a Hudson Institute event yesterday, researchers expressed alarm about Chinese authorities' ability to freely spread propaganda about Falun Gong in the West. Is the State Department concerned about this, and what is the action plan to counter such growing influence operations in the West, specifically in the U.S.?
I will speak to this a little bit broadly because I don't want to speak about this a specific context. We continue to see, of course, that we are very vigilant about the threat that of certain countries pose when it comes to spreading misinformation and disinformation, not just within their own countries, but in other countries. Domestically, here within the United States, that is not the purview of the State Department. Of course, colleagues at the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice can speak more to that. But broadly, in combating misinformation and disinformation around the globe, we're deeply engaged on this. It's something that the Global Engagement Center, it's something that the Secretary is prioritized on as well. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. A few days ago, another Pakistani journalist, Hassan Zaib, was killed in Pakistan. Overall, in 2024, 8 Pakistani journalists have been killed in a broad daylight. And these killings highlighting the growing threats to media workers in Pakistan. Any comments, any condolences?
Journalists need to be protected, and they need to be allowed to do their jobs, whether that be the United States, whether that be Pakistan, whether that be in the Gaza Strip. That is something that we feel strongly, and it's something that is deeply personal to the Secretary. It's obviously personal to us and this team, having spending most of our days engaging with you all. But simply put, journalists need to be protected and need to be able to do their job.
So last year,
thanks everybody.
Sir,
Thanks everybody.
Sir,
Thanks guys.
100%.